Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here on this edition of the REI Hacker Podcast. My next guest is a longtime friend. His name is Vincent Lanza. He's a real estate investor and mentor. He's the founder of Verity Property Investors, which specializes in creative finance acquisitions. He's also a national speaker and he hosts the weekly Wholesale Mastermind. Vincent, you and I have known each other for quite a long time.
Hmm.
We've done lots of different events together and we've done webinars and trainings, and man, you've got your hands in a lot of different things, a lot of exciting things. You just got back from Europe, which is pretty
Yeah.
cool. You went out there for your birthday. Tell us about that.
Well, one of my things that I've always wanted to do, I would say it's a bucket list thing, is to go to the small village that my great grandfather was born in, which is called San Fele. It's in a province of Italy called Basilicata, which is kind of close to Naples, not too far away from Naples. So, uh, yeah, that was like the primary purpose of our trip. We got to go. It was really cool. Went to the city town hall, got to see like all these old records from my great grandfather's birth certificate, his immigration records. Got to meet the mayor of the city, which was cool. So yeah. So again, one of the wonderful things about doing real estate is the flexibility that you have. Like our business was still running while we were in Europe, because you can do this business remotely with a laptop and a cell phone. It was great to be able to be in Europe and do some of the things that we had wanted to do, and some of like actually really long time dreams of like going back to that small town where it all started from in terms of my family history. My great grandfather migrated out of Italy to New York in the late 1800s. He was a pharmacist, and he opened several pharmacies in New York. And you know that move that he made to have the leap of faith to go from this very small town of just a few thousand people in Italy to New York to make a better life for me and all, the generations before and after, is something that really just moves me and moved me when I was there. I mean, to be honest with you, Benson, like when I first got there, I just started crying. It was like when you just see like where you came from and know that like they made like a big sacrifice for on our behalf, to
Yeah.
to make a better life for us. So yeah, so anyway, it's really cool. And again, business was still running, deals were
Yeah,
still being
business is still running. Were you doing any business there? Were you looking around and like, oh, we could, because there's like this credit they have in Italy where you can buy properties for next to nothing as long as you improve it, and they give you credits and stuff. Did you ever think about, oh, we could buy a property here?
we did. In fact, in that town where we were at, San Fele, which is where my great grandfather was, like I would say about 30% of the buildings are bombed out. So I mean, it could be possibly, I mean, we didn't take a deep dive into it, but I think anywhere we are, we're like aware of what's going on in real estate and we ask people questions about it. But there's places where you can buy like incredibly inexpensive property, you just have to agree to fix it up. So yeah, we did a little bit of that. We actually talked about it. We're like, I wonder if we could get a place here in Italy. So we'll see. Yeah, it's always,
Yeah.
when you're in
The
real
seed
estate,
is planted.
you're right. It's always in there, right? Like,
Oh yeah.
like it's like funny when you get into real estate, like whenever you travel somewhere now, like you can't help but notice, like, oh, that house would be, looks pretty tore up. Like that would be a great opportunity for a fix and flip, or you see whatever you see signs and stuff. Like you're
Oh
just
yeah.
you're hyper aware of that stuff when you're doing real estate.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, some of it is that creative object syndrome, right? Like some of it is just distraction, but you get to a certain point in your career where you've done enough to where you can do these projects that are completely unrelated to what your core competency is and still do it. And you're not going to drop a bunch of balls. You're not going to lose a bunch of money. You leverage other people's expertise to help you, connect the dots and make things happen. So it's definitely possible to do
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, yeah,
That's awesome.
so it's there. It's definitely there. We'll see what happens. I did actually, my ex-college roommate moved to Italy and he bought a place there. So I mean, and he's an architect too. So I have like, I have a bunch of friends there too, like that actually live in Italy, and then I have him too. So I mean, I'm sure I could pick his brains on like how he did what he did, because he bought like a place, and he's got like an olive orchard and some other things, and that's like for him and his wife, that's kind of like their dream home, you know?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's pretty cool too that you learned the history about your great grandfather, who who sounds like an entrepreneur, right?
Mm.
Like being a pharmacist per se isn't entrepreneurship. It seems like a normal job, but kind of pick up and move to a completely different country and start a new practice is entrepreneurial. You've got it in your blood.
Yeah, I would say so. I feel like if I look back at like even when I was a kid, like, I always kind of had that entrepreneurial spirit. Like I was always I
Yeah.
was sometimes selling stuff I shouldn't be selling, but
Oh,
we won't go down that
yeah. I
road.
don't want to get you in trouble. Let's keep that. We know the FBI is listening to this. What about your parents? Were they entrepreneurial?
I would say my dad was more of a scientist. That like we're talking about, like there was some entrepreneurship, especially with my great grandfather. From what I understand, he had several pharmacies that he started in New York, and was pretty successful in that. My dad was more of just a brainiac. He was a chemist. He had a PhD from New York University. He worked in in the scientific realm. He had like a whole bunch of patents and stuff. So, I mean, I guess to some extent he was, right, because he was like
Yeah.
inventing stuff and he had a lot of patents, and he invented things that were used in like aerospace and, aero technology and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, I suppose from a scientific point of view, he was entrepreneurial because he was like looking to invent new things and
Oh
recreating
yeah.
things, and like I said, he had a whole bunch of patents and wrote a whole bunch of technical papers and stuff like that. So yeah, I guess if I look at it, yeah, there was definitely entrepreneurship in the family for sure.
Yeah. And so that creativeness flowed into you as well because you were a musician for a long time.
Yeah, well, I mean, I still am, but I mean, I was like a professional musician on the road for many years and traveled like all over the world, to Asia and Europe and Canada, Mexico, North America, Africa. So yeah, so I think yeah, always been some creativity in me for sure.
Which flowed into, how you do real estate today, which, there's a different side of the mind that is used for creativity, right? Versus the rational mind. You got right and left sided brains.
Yeah.
So, how do you balance that, creative side of like wanting to do everything creative in real estate and then being practical about the numbers and making sure deals work?
Well, like you said, there's a creative side, right? There's a musician side, there's a creative business side, but there actually was a point in time when I was studying to be an accountant, which I realized that ultimately like that wasn't my love, that wasn't my passion, that wasn't like what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. But I think there's always been a balancing side, like where I've ended up like doing accounting for different organizations that I was in, like kind of looking more at the numbers and the business side of things. Um, so that's always been like that's been in me too. Like I said, it's not like my big passion, but it's just something that I'm capable of doing and have done a lot. So
Hmm.
yeah, so it's a balance. Like I think I tend to as I go along, I tend to try to delegate as much of that stuff as possible, right? So,
Oh
have
yeah,
a
that's smart.
bookkeeper, have an accountant, like have guys that do underwriting on our team now. But I actually still love numbers and stuff. Like I love that part of it because to me, that's that's also like a creative part of it to a certain extent, right? Especially when you're doing like some of the deals that we do with subject to and creative financing, like it's almost like a puzzle or it's a challenge. It's like a numbers game. Like, okay, how do we make this work? Like, what are the numbers?
Yeah.
How do we make it all fit together? So
So you've
yeah.
done a lot of different strategies. You've done rental properties and
Mhm.
you've done a lot of wholesaling and creative finance. Do you enjoy the creative side the most? Is that the one that really just kind of gets your blood boiling a little bit?
Yeah, I would say enjoy that the most because that's
Yeah.
the one that, first of all, usually presents the most challenges, usually presents, and within those challenges presents the most learning experiences. And so I love that part of it. I love the part of it like, okay, I'm faced with a challenge. Now, how am I gonna, confront that? And how am I gonna, work through that obstacle? And then what am I gonna learn from that? And I think when you're doing those type of things in any business that you're in, including real estate, it's like we all have this desire to learn. We all have this desire to grow. We all have this desire to expand. And like within that realm of doing creative deals, that to me is like where you can do that the most. Like literally, I would say almost every day, like I'm faced with something like that I need to work through, and I'm gonna learn something that I didn't know before. You know,
Hmm.
this was happening like just yesterday. I was talking with somebody from a title company. We are dealing with a certain situation on a property in Southern California. And I was like, I think I'm gonna do this. And they're like, no, you should probably do it this way. And it's like, oh man, I really appreciate your advice. Like I didn't think about it from that angle. Um,
Yeah.
so
Well,
learn something,
creative
learn something
really,
new yesterday. Probably
yeah.
new
You
today.
always are learning something new,
Yeah.
even this far into your career. And I've found the same thing. Like as soon as you think you got it figured out, you're gonna get smacked up across the
Right.
face with something new that you didn't
Something that you
anticipate.
never, yeah, something you never encountered before. You're like,
Oh
really?
yeah.
I didn't even know that could happen. Are you serious?
Right. And everybody's got their own way of doing it too. So like just going from like one state to another or from one title company to another thing, like they do things a different way. They've got different rules and they've got
Hmm.
different protocols and just, you
Hmm.
know, kind of like philosophies even on how to do business. And none of it's like right or wrong. And, sometimes people think like, oh, can't do this. It's illegal. And it's like, they don't know. They just have a certain way of doing things that they've always done them. And you got to educate people along the
Yeah.
way
Yeah.
about what's possible. And sometimes you can move people a little bit, but sometimes people are just so stubborn that like, no, we don't do it that way here. Right.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times I've heard that.
Yeah, I know. I have too. And I mean, I think like what happens is kind of just in human nature that people that are unfamiliar with something, they tend to say something like that, like it's illegal or, just rather than to take the time to investigate it. So it's interesting because we were talking to our team yesterday and we work a lot with real estate agents as I know does, as you do and a lot of people in the privy world and everything. But yeah, we were saying how like, we want to work with those agents that are open-minded. We want to work with those agents that understand investing, or if nothing else, like they're willing to say, hey, I don't know about this. I'd love to learn about it. So when you get those kind of personalities, which are much more open to like what we're talking about, like expand your horizon, grow. But there are a lot of people that are just kind of like in this box, right? It's like, this is the way we do it. You
Yeah.
know, I don't know. I don't want to know about anything else. I don't want to learn anything new. I'm just been doing it this way forever and always like I'm good. So yeah. But there's a lot of people out there is in the real estate world that are very open to learning and to expanding their horizons. So
And then sometimes you need to, right? Like I think that the creative side of real estate was invented because there weren't solutions through like normal practices, like cash deals, going to get a conventional loan, you know, low equity deals. Like at some point you hit a brick wall and someone was like, well, let's try something new. Let's try something creative to solve this problem because they had exhausted all their other options.
yeah. Yeah. And it actually goes back. I mean, the world we live in now, and you have just such widespread accessibility to like information. Like now, you can find these things online and stuff. But I mean, if you go back, I mean, there's guys like Leon Johnson and some of these other guys, Robert Allen, some of these other guys who have been around for many years that like they were doing this stuff like back in the 60s and 70s, probably even back in the 50s, right? So it's kind of, I wonder who was the first, it's kind of like, you'll never probably know, but like who was the first person
Right.
they thought about that? Like, oh yeah, we can do it this way. Somebody basically thought outside the box and made it happen, and they were doing that stuff. But I mean, again, education and everything wasn't as widespread and accessible as it is today. Now it's like, you got guys like Pace Morby out there and, some of these other people who are like, they're all over the place talking about this stuff.
Oh yeah. And you hear about new things all the time too.
Mhm.
There's well, as soon as you think you know all the strategies that people do, you hear a new one or a twist
Oh
to
yeah.
something new, and you're like, oh wow, I didn't know you could wholesale a note, or I didn't know you could do seller financing with like three different pieces, like a subto and the Morby method, and then all these other different ways of putting deals together. But for the audience, let's kind of break down what creative is,
Okay.
right? So there's like a standard transaction, right? You go to somebody, they have the ability to sell you a property, you go get a loan from a hard money lender or a conventional type lender, and you
Mhm.
you pay them the money that they want, right? And that would potentially pay off an existing mortgage, any liens that they have, and anything that's left over, they get to keep, right? That's kind of like a traditional sale.
Yeah.
But you're going to go up to somebody one time and, they can't sell the property for what they want to sell it for, or, they don't have any equity, or there's some distressed situation. So you got to start getting creative, right? So what are some of the scenarios that you've seen where creative is needed and works?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always good to just maybe give a couple of real world examples, and then that kind of in those real world examples kind of understand what it is. So I'll give one real world example of a property that we took over here in Walnut Creek, California, or Concord. I'm sorry, they're right next to each other. It's Concord, California. So this guy, older guy, actually had been into real estate for a while, but he had a property that was extremely distressed, was taken over by hoarders, was in terrible shape, had squatters who were drug addicts in the garage. So he was just kind of overwhelmed by it all. He had two mortgages on the property. He did have some equity in the property. But it's just kind of more, he was elderly. I met him a couple times. I would say he wasn't like in the best of health. I mean, I don't know specifically, but when I met him, he seemed a little bit like feeble and weak. So it's just like too much for him to do. So what we did was we went to him and said, how about if we do this? How about if we take over paying your mortgages, which there were two mortgages, one with Bank of America, and I think the other one was with Chase. So we're going to pay those payments, which is what we talk about, subject to the existing mortgage. Essentially, the mortgage stayed in his name, and then our company, Verity Property Investors, took over those mortgages, and we just paid them, to the banks directly. So that was one side of the transaction. And the other side of the transaction was that we actually did give him some cash, not a large amount of cash, but we did give him some cash. So we had a little bit of money in the interim. And then the third factor of the transaction was that he had equity in the property. So from our perspective, because what we were planning on doing with this property was to fix and flip it, which took us about 9 months to do, but did end up coming out really profitably. But with the equity in the property, we wanted him to basically seller finance that equity to us. So rather than paying him today, like you're talking about with a traditional, transaction, we would have gotten a loan and the mortgages would have been paid off and he would have been paid his money. We said, what about this? What about if we don't pay you today, but we will give you some amount of interest on your money. And when we do sell the property 9 months from now, then you'll get paid off in full. So we had a subject to portion of it, which was that we were paying the mortgages that stayed in his name, but we were on title as the owners of the property. We paid him a certain amount of cash, so he got some money in his pocket. And then the third element of that was that he seller financed to us his equity, his remaining equity, which I want to say was about $125,000 at an interest rate. And the terms of the note were such, which you can negotiate this, were such that we wouldn't have to pay him the principal and interest until we sold the property. Now that could have been done a different way. We were able to negotiate that, which was to our benefit, because the only expense that we had for a house that cost like $450,000 that we bought it for and sold it for, like close to 800,000. But that being said, it needed a lot of work. The benefit we had is that really the only cost we had was the money we gave them up front and the mortgages, which I'm going to say was around a couple of $1,000s a month for us. So yeah, it worked out well for us because we didn't have a lot of upfront costs on the money that we were getting. And he was happy with that because he got a distressed property off of his hands that he didn't know what to do with. We
Yeah.
took out all the responsibility of cleaning out all the junk out of the house, which took like weeks and tens of thousands of dollars just alone to do that part. We took on the responsibility of getting the squatters out of the house. So, at the end of the day, everybody was happy with the transaction. And so, I mean, that's one real world example that sort of includes a lot of the things we do, which are subject to seller finance. And actually that deals what we call hybrid because it's a combination of subject to and seller finance together because we took over his mortgages and we also financed the equity in his house. So yeah. So that's probably a good real world example that sort of explains
Yeah.
like a lot of the different aspects at and just to give you an idea of the numbers, if you're just curious, is like, so I think we bought the house for about 450. I think we gave him about $50,000 cash. We took over those mortgages, which were about a couple $1,000s, and we financed about $125,000 at like a 3% interest rate. So at the end of the day, I think we sold the house for like 775 or something like that. And I think, all in on it, we were like somewhere around 650 or 675. So it worked out really well for us as well as everybody else
Hmm.
concerned. And he was super happy because he sold the house and made his money, got his mortgage paid off, made a little bit of interest on the money and stuff as well.
Yeah, that sounds like a great deal. That it worked out well. Everybody came out on the positive end of things. Was it difficult to get him to understand all those different elements? Was there a lot of trust there? Because it seems like if he was an older gentleman, like at some point in your age, you lose some of your mental faculty,
Yeah.
right? And so, I mean, even for like an average age person to understand that structure that you just described is pretty challenging, right? Especially if you're not a real estate person. But even
Mhm.
somebody who understands real estate has challenges. Number one, understanding how to structure that, and then number two, how to explain it to somebody who doesn't even know. How was that process and getting him on board with all of the different pieces of that structure?
Yeah. Well, he did know real estate a bit, so that was definitely an advantage. I mean, I think you're always in a position where you need to build trust and rapport with somebody. And the way that we always come up is that in with people is like we're looking for people that have a problem that needs to be solved and coming in as a problem solver. And I know like in this podcast and in the world that we're in, we talk about all these things subject to in hybrid and seller finance. I mean, when we're talking to the sellers, we don't use that terminology. We try to break it down really, really simply. So, an approach to him was like, so what about this? What about if we take over the payments for your mortgages so that's off your plate? What about if we put some cash in your pocket right now? And what about if, with the equity that you have left in the house, we pay you because we're going to plan on fixing and flipping this house, and we're going to say it's going to be 9 months. Let's just call that, the period of time that we feel is reasonable. At the end of 9 months, not only will we give you back all the equity in your house, but we'll also give you some additional interest on that money, so that you're actually going to make more money on this at the end of the day. So yeah, I mean, I think the approach was just to try to break it down as simply as possible into a
Hmm.
simple language and not use any terms of like, this is a hybrid deal, this is subject to this. No, this is just, here's what it is. Here's how it's going to work. And here's why it's going to be beneficial to you. Well, first of all, it's going to be beneficial to you because at the end of the day, you're going to get more money because we're giving you interest. And as well, this is going to take this headache property off of your hands. We're going to deal with everything. And most of the time we're telling people like, hey, you don't have to worry, like, because people will say, well, I have to clean out the house. I'm like, no, don't worry. Like, just leave it as is. We'll take care of everything. Like, you don't have to sweat anything. You don't have to worry about the squatters that are in your garage. You don't have to worry about the mounds of junk that are all over the house and in the backyard. Like, you know, even the old bombed out cars and whatever. We'll take care of all that. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, you're coming in being a problem solver and then trying to just figure out something that makes sense for the person who's trying to sell the property and trying to explain that to them in a way that's easily digestible and understandable. So I never use, I try to use as few or never use any like technical terms for any of this stuff. Like I just talk in very simple terms,
Yeah. In
something.
this deal, you said he made more money than he would have made if he had just sold it outright. Plus, he saved on realtor costs.
Mhm.
So realtor costs 3%, and
Yeah.
then the interest he made on the loan to you guys.
Yeah.
So he maybe came out $20,000 above board or
Yeah.
more than
Yeah.
he
Or
would have
more.
if you went and just sold it on the MLS.
Yeah. And plus I think we played all the closing costs and stuff too. So like, he didn't have that expense. He didn't have the realtor commission. He got extra interest on the money. Yeah, so exactly. So he came out, doing really well, made more
Yeah,
money.
20 to 30 grand he probably made just by working with you guys.
Hmm.
That's great. Yeah, that sounds like a win-win situation.
Yeah, he was happy at the end of the day, and we were too. Like it worked out. It was a bit of a challenging project because it was so tore up, and it had so much junk in it, but at the end of the day, we got it turned around and, it came out profitably for us. So it was a good deal for everybody concerned.
Yeah. So the pros for the seller, and let's do the pros and cons of both, right? For the
Okay, sure.
seller and then for the
Yeah.
investor. So the pros for the seller are they can get more money for their property, right? Because if you're doing creative, you you can give them a higher price as long as you get the terms that you want, right?
Hmm. Exactly.
So better terms, like the one you just described, but it could be, longer time period, lower interest rates, all the things that would make the deal look better for you, but you can give them a higher price. They
Hmm.
didn't have to deal with all the headaches of cleaning the property out and that sort of thing. And they made some extra money because they didn't have to pay real estate agents and they got interest on the loan. What are what are some of the other benefits to the seller?
Um, I mean, I think you covered most of them. I'm just trying to think of anything, but like you said, he made a little bit more money out of it. He didn't have to pay agent commission, etc. He got the headache off of his plate, and at the end of the day, it solved the problem and made him a little bit more money. So, I mean,
Hmm.
some of the time you can talk about other benefits. I mean, that didn't apply in this particular situation, but sometimes when you're doing other deals, there can be some income tax benefits and stuff and things like that. I mean, it's not going to apply to this deal, but that's another.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just talking about in general, the pros
Yeah,
and cons
yeah,
of
yeah. So
creative.
another one can be that, yeah, if you're extending out, like obviously if you get one large lump sum of money all at once, like it usually is going to be a big capital gains hit on you. And so we've done this at times, like even with properties that we've had where we've just extended out the payments over time so that that capital gains hit gets lessened. Uh,
Mm,
yeah. So that's another benefit. I mean, another benefit again is like we've said, they can walk away with some amount of cash in their pocket. Like most of the times on most of the deals, like the sellers, even like in sometimes even when a seller has like very low equity in their house, we're still able to get them some money in their pocket, just based on how we were working the transaction.
right.
I mean, there are many cases where if the seller was just to sell it traditionally, they probably would be making zero or actually losing money, actually having to spend money to sell their house. And with the type of things that we do, we can turn that around to where we're actually, rather than having to spend money to sell their house, we can put a little bit of money in their pocket in order for them to sell the house. So that's a big plus for a lot of people, particularly people that have like low equity in their house, to where
Oh yeah.
on the sale, after they pay all the closing costs and commissions and everything else they have to pay, would be upside down and would have to take out money out of their pocket. So we run into that quite a bit, and people love that, right? It's like, oh, that's great. Like rather than having to spend money to sell my house, like I'm actually going to walk away making a little bit of money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the other thing too, which maybe isn't as important, but like saving their credit. Some of these people are in bad
Oh, yeah,
situations. So,
absolutely.
if they can't afford their mortgage, right, they get into a bad situation, so they're not going to make that payment. Their credit takes a dip. But with you guys, you take over those payments, so right away they're getting more consistent payments, might even help their credit go up a bit.
Oh, it does. Absolutely. I mean, one of the things, because we deal with a lot of people that are in like, going through difficult financial situations. And one of the things is like we've been able so many times to bail people out of that. I mean, we're dealing with something like that right now where the guy's like $160,000 behind on his mortgage. And so we're just working with him to get him back up to speed and get that all those arrears paid off and get his mortgage, back on track. So, there's probably, I mean, if you're honest, there's probably a bit of a ding against her credit, but I mean, if they go down the road of foreclosure or something else, like that's going to be like a disastrous effect on them,
Yeah.
from a credit point of view and from the future of trying to buy another home or whatever they might try to do in the future. So yeah, no, that's definitely a benefit and definitely something that
Hmm.
I actually really love it when we're able to help people out like in those situations. And it's happened many, many times where we're able to kind of bail people out from, them having their home foreclosed on and just being able to come in and pay off what they owe and get their loan back in good standing and everything. So yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That's like a big benefit because
Hmm.
um if you end up having to go through a foreclosure, it really like it's gonna really just be not a good situation
Oh
for
yeah, because the foreclosure itself is different than just a credit score hit. Like
Yeah.
there's credit score hits where your credit score goes down. But if that was the only negative, that'd be bad. But then they look at, okay, you have a foreclosure, right? So there are actually provisions in loans that says you can't have a foreclosure in the last number of years, right?
Yeah.
Regardless of what your credit score is. So severing them from that is certainly a benefit. Now, with the cons to a seller, right? The main one is that they just don't get most of their money all up front, right?
Hmm.
Usually it's maybe has to be spread out over time, especially if it's seller financing. But I don't always know if that's a big con because a lot of us are trying to become the banks with private money lending and doing things like that. So like if they don't get all their money up front, they're getting interest on it,
Yeah.
which makes them like the bank, but in their mind potentially that's a con because they're like, yeah, I want all my money up front, but it's usually is spread out over time, right?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, and again, it's case by case situations. It really just depends on somebody's individual circumstances. Like some people want the money for a very specific purpose. Um, Yeah, I remember one deal we did a while ago in California where the guy was like, I need to get this cash because he had moved to Arizona. He was in the military and they transferred him from California to Arizona. He's like, because I want to build a garage on my house. I'm like, so he was just adamant. Like there wasn't really, you weren't going to negotiate with the guy because it was just like, I want this money because this is what I'm going to do with it. He had a very specific purpose. But I would say if people don't have a very specific purpose, like it's a real benefit to be able to get like consistent income with interest every month um, by seller financing your home and seller financing the equity you have in your home. So again, case by case based benefit. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call it a con. I mean, it's just some people have a very specific purpose, like they want the money because they're going to do something very specifically with it. But if they're not in that,
Hmm.
if they're not in that category, if they're not, if that's not one of the criteria that's critical for them, then like it's definitely beneficial because like you look at what the banks do and how amortized loans work and how they're uploaded up front with interest and I mean, we could pull out an amortization chart and say, if you sold your house for whatever, say $400,000 at like a 5% interest rate, just for an example. I mean, we probably see that over time, like you're actually getting like $600,000 for that home, right? So, and
Yeah.
and the thing is also like since it's so front loaded with interest, if somebody was say to sell that home or refinance it at some point in time, you still would be getting like back a good sum of money because the principal is going down so low in the first years of the loan. So yeah, I think there's a lot of advantages to doing seller finance. I mean, to figure out if banks have been doing this stuff for all these years, like they got something going. Like you're right,
Sure.
you know, they've got this thing figured out. They know what's going on and how beneficial it is, and how whoever figured out like how to do amortization and stuff. Like it's like yeah, it's amazing how like you can, just be we're paying off and like in the first years of those loans, like the principal is going down very, very, very slowly. So you're like it's just they're all front loaded with interest.
Yeah.
That's
And
actually
then, and they're protected by the real estate too, right? So if you
Mhm,
end up not making the payments or you end up
mhm,
defaulting on your end of the deal,
mhm,
they just get the property back,
mhm.
right? So there really is not a better way to structure it because it's backed by real estate
Yeah.
and and your ability to perform, which that's the full intention when you do the deal in the first place is to perform and then execute your strategy, your exit strategy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've always performed on all the houses uh that we bought, but I mean, we definitely dealt with people that haven't performed on the other end of things. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, let's talk about that. So where, like, if someone's trying to do creative, they think like, okay, I saw this on YouTube or I saw like one presentation from Pace, and so they're going to do a subject to deal or something like that. Like, where could a newbie get caught up in doing a deal like this, and where are the blind spots they should be aware of?
Yeah, well, what I would say, and it's what we did when we first got into the business, right? When we started first doing wholesaling, got with people that really knew what they were doing so that we could learn. So I mean, I think it's always important to have mentors beside you, or somebody that has walked this road before, so So a lot of people that we deal with, we team up with them because they are newer, and then we can walk them through like the process because we've done it so many times now, doing so many transactions. Um, so I'd say the first thing is like, team up with somebody, or get with somebody that can guide you through the process, or team up with somebody that can guide you through the process, and you're going to learn. I mean, we've done that. Like I said, we did that when we first got in the business, and then when we first started working with Pace, we learned so much from him. And when we were doing our um, first creative transactions, we were just talking to him almost every day, like, hey, we're dealing with this, what do we do here? What do we do there? So we learned so much in that process by having a mentor who had walked the road that we were walking, the new road we were walking down, but they had walked through down it before. Blind spots. I think one of the biggest blind spots is just is over anxiousness. And what happens, and I'm even guilty of this, like early on when we first started doing this, is like you just want to do a deal and it's subject to, or it's creative finance or whatever, it's seller finance. And you're so excited that you have a blind spot to whether it's actually a good deal or not.
Mm,
So I know I was guilty of that early on. Like I was, wanting to do this so badly that I was like the first one that fell into my lap. I didn't really analyze it thoroughly. I didn't really realize that like the interest rate actually was really high. This was a subject to deal. And so it really wasn't like a great deal to take over subject to. Now I subsequently had to refinance that house and then down the road flip it. So we came out okay at the end of the day. But I would just say blind spots are like just being over anxious to not really do your due diligence and understand. And I think it's great to be anxious and exuberant and take action. But the pitfall that I think that many people fall into is just like, oh, I just got a contract, or I got a deal. And you're like not even like worried if is it a good deal? Is it like, does it even make sense? Like, or are you just
yeah.
like doing it to do it because you can say you did it? So once again, I think that, you know, re-emphasizes the importance of getting with somebody that can give you an honest assessment of that transaction. Like, is this really a good deal or not?
Mhm.
And being able to just accept that, like, actually, no, it's not. So maybe I should not get involved with it because it's going to be more detrimental than beneficial to me.
Right. Well, and there's so many measuring sticks for what a good deal is,
Hmm.
right? So the first thing people think about, especially when it's subject to, or is a cash flow. So like, okay, well, I need a certain, a couple $100, or I need a certain percentage above the what I would pay for the mortgage for it to be a viable deal. But then they're not thinking about, okay, well, my plan is to keep this for 5 years. What's the appreciation rate
Yeah.
over
Hmm.
the next 5 years? Right. And then they're like, okay, well, appreciation is one thing, cash flow, potential equity there if they can get a deal at a discount. Maybe it needs a little bit of work so they can add value to it through like a fix and flip. And you get value add, but almost nobody thinks about depreciation,
Hmm.
right? So tell us where the, I mean, that I think is a blind spot for evaluating a deal and really looking at all the different angles. And they may end up passing up on a deal because it doesn't make sense from a cash flow perspective, but aren't taking into consideration all the other positives.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think what Benson, what's really important here is that you have to look at your situation, right? You have to look at what are your goals and what are you trying to accomplish? So there's many people in the real estate business that are like, I just need immediate cash. And that's why, they're getting more involved in the wholesale. And there's other people that are like, I can play the long game. I'm okay with playing the long game. And I think you also have to just assess what your financial situation is, right? Because if you're going to play the long game, then you have to, in a lot of ways, you have to be financially able to do that, right? So, I mean, there's people that would be, I mean, I know a lot of people that are like, I'm not making any money on this property, but I'm okay with that because 5 years from now, this property is going to be worth like, 50% more than what I paid for it. And also in year 3, I actually am going to be positively cash flowing because I'm going to increase the rent or the income from the property over time. And they're able to do that, right? They're in a financial position where they're able to do that. And because they're looking at this from the long game point of view, they're okay with that. So I think each person and anybody that's listening to this today, you have to assess where you're at, like
Mm-hmm.
your individual situation. Do you need immediate cash flow? Well, then you need to look at the deals that you get are going to have immediate cash flow. Or are you in it for the long game? And like I said, I have plenty of friends that are like, take over properties that they make nothing on, but they know in the long game that it's going to be profitable to them, either because of appreciation or because over time, eventually the property will cash flow. And they're perfectly okay with that. But they're also usually people that are like that are people that have some amount of experience under their belt and have some amount of finances under their belt. So what I would not suggest is that you do things that are going to impact your finances negatively if you're not prepared to play that long game, right? And so, I mean, it's interesting because we're in a position right now where a lot of properties that we got 5 years ago, like the terms of the loans are coming up. And so we're having to make some decisions. Are we going to refinance it? And these were creative deals that we did. Are we going to just go ahead and turn it around? But the nice thing is that like all of those properties, because it was 5 years ago, and they were all in good markets like Georgia and Florida and California, et cetera, have a good amount of equity in them. So we do have a choice now, like, do we want to hold on to this and refinance it, or do we want to just go ahead and sell it now and then pull out our equity and then reinvest that into something else? But that was a long game. I mean, it's a 5-year game, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we had when 5 years ago we were like, okay, we bought these properties and we knew that those loans were going to come up 5 years later, and then now we're just in a position where you need to just make those decisions. So yeah, so again, maybe a long answer, but the point is that you really have to assess even individually where you're at and what's going to work for you, and make sure that you don't financially stretch or stress yourself out. Because what I would say is, um, with a lot of properties, it does take some financing to, I mean, so say do you take over a property, for instance, like subject to, and you're going to rent it. There's probably maybe some money you need to put in to get it ready to rent. I mean, at the very least, any property we've ever gotten, we had to clean it and do some yard work and landscaping and stuff like that. And then it's going to take some time to find somebody to get into that property, right? So you're going to
Mm-hmm.
have a period of time where you're going to be putting out some money on getting the property ready, and then you're going to be paying a mortgage payment during that period of time and stuff. So yeah, just just be prepared for that. But I mean, at the end of the day, if you really look at it and you assess it and you're okay with kind of the risk reward that we deal with in any business, including real estate, like you were saying, one of the upsides is that most properties appreciate over time, and in certain markets they appreciate quite a bit.
Yeah, they definitely do. And that's one of the cool things about this business too, is that, and especially for new people, um, who are maybe only understand a wholesale, they come across the deal where the numbers just don't make sense, but they're in a network of people who understand creative. They can take that to somebody else and say, like, I got this deal. I don't know if it makes any sense. What do you think? And that property may not make sense for the wholesale because they're thinking about cash flow, but it might make sense for somebody else in the network who needs to offset some active capital,
Right.
active revenue, and they need the depreciation. And so they could wholesale that deal, still make a little bit of money on it, and get the property to somebody else who can take the benefit of how that property is currently structured.
Right. Yeah, like you said, I mean, depreciation is another factor that, people don't take into account. And I think, especially if you're newer, like it's not something that's like really strongly on your radar. But as time goes on and you're like building up more in your business and everything, like you need to look at those things, because then you're starting to look at like, well, how can I offset some of the profits that I'm making, without having to pay like some astronomical amount of taxes. And there's a lot of legal ways that the government is set up for us to be able to, like you said, take depreciation and other things that
Hmm.
benefit for us as property owners.
Yeah, it's pretty complex, and that's the part about the subject too. Is it is a more advanced strategy. There's a lot of new people in our communities, right? Like people
Yeah,
come in, they've never done a deal, and the first thing they want to try to do is a subject to deal.
yeah,
And I don't know if that's advisable, but that's why you've taken over kind of this mentorship role within the sub two community. You spend a lot of time with newer people trying to get them up to speed and help them with the challenges that they have. But probably one of the biggest challenges those people have is not that they don't understand the subject to, or is that they just can't get out of their own way. Like they've got, limiting beliefs and they've got all of this stuff holding them back from their childhood and they just can't pull the trigger. Like, what do you say to those people who are trying to get this business going but just can't get it going?
yeah. Well, I mean, I think I know it's somewhat cliche, but I mean, it is true. And it's kind of like what we did when we first got into the Subto community and started working with PACE is that you just have to take action. And what happens is people, they, how they get in their way is they feel like they can't move forward unless they have the knowledge. But the truth of the matter is that you won't have the knowledge until you move forward. So, I mean, that's the completely, if I rewind the tape and go back like 4+ years ago, and we're just learning about all these things that we're talking about today, and we're working with Pace, and we're learning from him. I mean, the way that we learned was not to like, wait, I need to wait till I have all the knowledge and then I'm going to move forward. No, it was like, I'm going to move forward and I'm going to gain the knowledge by moving forward. I mean, there's no better way to learn than experience, right? Like, so many of us who went to school and many of the people that are listening to today, I'm sure went to college. It's like, if you really boil it all down, like I went to college and I have a, a degree in business management or business something. I don't even know what it is. I have to, it's up on my wall somewhere. I'd have to look
Yeah,
at what.
you're looking up on the wall.
Yeah,
Where's
yeah.
that piece of
What
paper?
was that degree? But the point of the matter is, I mean, I learned some stuff in school, but it wasn't until I actually started doing business that I actually learned about business. So
Yeah.
my education really was like the first business that I started in San Francisco was an import and export company where we imported goods from overseas and then we sold them wholesale here in the city of San Francisco. And we have a large tourist industry here, so we sold to a lot of the tour shops. And I mean, I really learned. I learned about like what are letters of credit. I learned how to do the transportation. I learned like how to do the sales side. I learned how. Yeah, I mean, this learned so many things about how the business works, right? And it's all stuff that I didn't do in school. And did I make mistakes? Yeah, sure I did. Like because I'm learning on the job. I'm learning as I go. So again, for people that are newer, I mean, it's just like take action, even if it's imperfect action. And then the second thing is what we talk about. It's like just get people next to you that can be mentors. They can guide you through it. Like it's so important. And we've had the fortune that, good fortune to have that. And then now we've been fortunate enough to be able to be those people. I mean, we had mentors that guided us through this, and now we are able to be those mentors for other people. So, to pay it forward, is something that, that I always want to do because somebody, held my hand, somebody was willing to teach me, somebody was willing to spend time with me. So, I also want to pay it forward. So, yeah,
Yeah.
take action and get somebody next to you that, can help you to learn. Like, don't try to just figure it out all on your own. You don't need to do that, right? There's people that will help you. And again, this happens all the time. But I mean, even if like you've never done a deal before and you get next to somebody like, me and my team or somebody else that that you trust and or have a relationship with, and just work with them, you're gonna learn. You're gonna learn so much. Like early on when we were doing deals, we were working with a transaction coordinator who was really knowledgeable and I just learned so much about how the contracts worked and how the transactions work. Like, at that time we hired that person to do this for us, but um, at some point in time we didn't need it anymore because we just learned so much from working with them that we're able to do it ourselves.
Yep.
So you're going to be like, you're going to be like a kid, right? Like you're going to like not know how to do it and then you're slowly going to learn and then eventually like you're going to be able to just go off on your own and do it you're going to be able to do it on its own, and you're going to go from being the student to the teacher. I mean, that's the journey that I've taken, right? I was the student and now I'm the teacher.
Oh yeah. And I'm sure it's so fulfilling too when you help somebody get their first deal done
Oh, yeah, I
and
love it.
that
I
look
love
on
it.
their face and
Yeah.
they're like, "Oh my God, I did it." Right. And
Yeah.
so yeah, it's so fulfilling. I love that part too. And over the years and just helping people have that aha moment or get a deal done,
Yeah.
their first deal
It's
or their
it's proof
next
of
deal.
it's proof of concept, right? Because you're doing this and you're listening to stuff on YouTube and you're getting all this input and you're hearing about all these other people. And it's like when it happens for you, it's like it's the magical moment. It's like amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. So what's next for you? Are you just looking to scale your company and do more deals, or are you looking at, what's the next level of deal that I can start taking on? What do you and Ann looking forward to?
Yeah, yeah. Well, to a large extent, yeah, we're scaling what we're doing. I mean, we started it out as just the two of us, me and my wife, Ann. We, eventually partnered up with some people, but I mean, now we have a team of about 15 people that work with us. So, I think the journey in the last like 6 to 9 months has been like, just learning how to work with a team, the communication, the processes that we're doing, scaling that business. So that's probably the challenge that's like immediately in front of us. Beyond that, like one of my greater visions is to work on getting first time home buyers into homes, using creative finance. So I've been working on that and trying to work on ways that I can do that. I have some goals that I would like to see because I know how hard it is a lot of times for people to just get into a home. And if we can make that process a little bit easier, and part of it, can be through doing things subject to where, maybe people are able to take over mortgages that are a little lower in, uh, percentage rates than they are in the current market today. So that's something that we're working on more long term. I know for my wife also, like one of her aspirations, which I completely support, is to work on providing housing for foster children that are aging out of the system. So we've been able to work on that not super directly, but by finding properties that work for that, and then working with other people that actually have this, have the wherewithal to set that home up and then make it a home where foster children who are aging out of the system can have a place to go while they're getting, the next phase and step of their life together. So those are a couple of, those are a couple of the bigger long-term visions that we have.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, you've done so much and you're such a big part of, the sub two community and even, some of the, peripheral communities that are around. And I know people love, they call you Uncle Lanza.
Yeah, they call me Uncle Lanza.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and so, people love talking to you. So I know that, the work that you're doing is meaningful for them too. And I know that you and Ann are going to accomplish your goals with the next level of your business. If people are interested in working with you, where can they find you? Are you on social? Do you got a website they can go to?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of different ways. We have a website, which is lanzapartners.com. On social, you can find me on Instagram. It's Vincent Douglas underscore. And I guess we can put all this stuff the uh
Yeah.
into the podcast later. And then if you want to get with me and get like all the free resources we have, it's lanzapartners.com/Vincent. So we'll make sure we put all these links in there so you have all the links and can connect up with us. But yeah, we have a bunch of free resources that we do. I do something every week called the Wholesalers Mastermind, where we just teach about wholesaling. There's no charge. I'm not trying to sell a mentorship or anything. Again, it's just part of the whole process of paying forward. Like I said, like so many people have helped me that like I feel like it's important for me to take what's been given to me and pay it forward to others who are like just, on the initial part of their journey. So yeah. So anyway, we'll drop all those links into the uh
We'll put them in the show notes.
yeah, in the show notes. Got it. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah. Awesome, Vincent. Well, it was so cool to catch up with you. Appreciate it. Happy you guys had a great trip
Yeah.
to Italy and all the cool things you got going on with your investment company. But thanks for taking the time to be here. I really appreciate it. And for anybody that's listening, reach out to Vincent. He's just such a good guy to work with. He really has a heart for helping people, and he definitely says he does what he says he's going to do. So check out Vincent, and also to keep an eye out for future episodes of the REI Hacker Podcast, where we talk about real estate investing and entrepreneurship and business building and all different aspects of trying to make money in this world. So keep an eye out for those. And everybody, thanks for listening. Vincent, thanks again.
Yeah, thanks, Benson. It was a pleasure. It's always great
Take
to
care.
That's a wrap on today's Real Estate Revelations. Thank you for tuning into the REI Hacker Podcast. Remember, every property has a story, and every deal is a lesson. Until next time, keep hacking the real estate world.